Well, hello and welcome everybody. I'm Nick Frigo from Newbreed. Whether you're here live or you're listening to a recording of this webinar, we are so glad that you joined this group of experts to learn how to successfully migrate to HubSpot. We know that today companies of all shapes, sizes, growth stages are looking for ways to elevate their revenue performance while they do the hard work of reducing complexity and doing more with less. And as HubSpot's top solutions partner in North America, we at New Breed believe the best way to do that is to build your revenue org on and around the HubSpot platform. So that makes a successful migration to HubSpot a really high impact but very high stakes endeavor for your business. So we're excited to have both the expertise and the experience on our panel today while we cover that complex topic. Uh, if you'll give me an extra slide, a quick introduction on Newbreed. So if you're new to the Newbreed community, we're the top HubSpot solutions partner in North America, the only partner to win that 3 times. And we help companies unlock meaningful growth through professional services and things like revenue operations or RevOps, integrations, CRM strategy, demand generation, and web. Um, I'm actually going to pass the microphone today to my colleague Jackie, who can introduce herself, our panelists, and guide you through today's webinar. So, Jackie.
Thanks, Nick. So like Nick mentioned, my name is Jackie Turbot. I actually manage our RevOps service team here at New Breed, and RevOps is actually my industry. So I've been working in this for about 8 years, and I manage all the strategists here that actually do the migrations for our clients here at New Breed. And Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Growth Schools and what you do there.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Barber, and I'm the VP of Marketing at Growth Schools. We help school leaders access money and resources to create thriving schools for kids around America.
Awesome. And we're super excited to have you here. Elise, you want to tell us about yourself and what you do at Simpro?
Totally. Elise Singham. I am digital marketing manager over at Simpro. I work on our growth team. I really email marketing, marketing automation, lead nurture. That's all in my wheelhouse. Simpro, we are a global company headquartered in Brisbane, Australia, but we have offices all over the globe, including here in Denver, Colorado, where I'm speaking to you today. Also, an office in UK and New Zealand. And we are field service software. So looking forward to talking to you guys today.
Awesome. Thanks. Really excited to have you both with me today as panelists. So let's start with why. Why do people migrate? Today's revenue and operations leaders are migrating to HubSpot for a variety of different reasons. It unlocks capabilities, efficiency, or productivity that'll actually help them grow and scale. It'll consolidate and simplify technology. It aligns teams, processes, and data, but really it future-proofs their operations. Oftentimes we hear things like, our sales and marketing teams desperately need to get on the same page and are super unaligned. We've had changes in goals or leadership or business strategy, and it's brought attention to our subpar tech stack. Or our CRM or HubSpot just kind of feels like a junk drawer. So, Elise, tell me, what were the driving forces behind your choice to migrate to HubSpot, and what outcomes were you most eager to drive?
Yeah, well, we've been talking about getting off our existing MAP, excuse me, for a while. And largely part of that is because we were outgrowing it. We're growing very, very fast as a company. We are a global company. We have acquired other companies that are going to be bringing in as business units. So it was just clear that we needed to move to a different solution that was going to be able to encompass all of our needs and eventually allow us to have collaboration between our business units. So that was a big driver of kind of looking to move off of Pardot, which we were currently on, into something that was going to be a lot more robust, a lot more enterprise grade, and just give us a lot more capability in terms of marketing automation and cross collaboration.
That's awesome. Michael, what about you and Grow Schools? What was the driving force?
Yeah, there were 4 major driving factors for us. One, we wanted to right-size our platform. The last platform we were on, I would consider complicated and really cumbersome, especially for an organization of our size. We wanted to future-proof ourselves as well. Again, we had not seen much iteration and innovation on the last platform that we were on for several years, and it didn't feel like it was moving forward. We were also trying to bolt on third-party tools to, access features that we could see and readily access within HubSpot. And this really meant like a patchwork of collection of tools that we were putting together in our tech stack that didn't, on any given day, we might have an issue or error that we were constantly troubleshooting. So we wanted to reduce the number of tools that we were having our team manage just from an efficiency perspective. The third, we just, from a user experience perspective, especially for our non-technical team members in the building, we wanted a platform that felt easier to use, and for those non-technical team members to really get behind and not feel like it was adding to their already busy days. And last, reporting. Because of the tech stack we had before, we were cobbling together reports from disparate resources and different sources, and the migration has given us the opportunity to change all of that.
Yeah, we hear that a lot, honestly. The UI and helping and letting people, users day to day, actually be easier. So, but really many are still reluctant or unready to migrate. 35% of non-HubSpot users find it difficult to transition off of their current technology. And these are real concerns. Leaders are reluctant to put their jobs on the line and make the decision. Status quo bias can prevent action. They can't afford any latency or downtime in production, or the lack of knowledge and resources to see the project through in a timely completion. Michael, speak to those leaders out there who are considering but reluctant to migrate. Where would you agree with them, and where and how would you challenge them?
I mean, beyond the, just the basic idea of like your sanity as a human being and marketer, and self-care and team bandwidth and, breaking stuff that sometimes doesn't need to be broken, right? A lot of these migrations, I think maybe the biggest hurdle is it works. Why would we want to fix this? Why would we want to go through this massive change inside the business? And so you have to spend a lot of time figuring out, what are the reasons behind making this decision, whether it is, a fiduciary monetary related reason, or whether it is to help the long-term viability and efficiency of the team. What's going to be the ROI of this sort of migration, right? Especially when you're investing, such a large sum of money, not only in just, your licenses, but in cost to get you across that migration finish line and ongoing as you try and improve the platform that you're moving to. So I totally appreciate that, anyone that's in this position of making this decision and selling it inside the organization might second guess, just their basic sanity of wanting to go through this sort of process. I think the thing you have to realize, though, is that, at the end of the day, beyond the creative capabilities of our teams, these days we're, if we're going to perform well as a team, we're only as good as the tools we have at our disposal. And so for us, going back to some of the reasons why it was necessary to make this change, was that we weren't realizing the full potential of what we could do from our revenue operations perspective by the tools that we had at our disposal. It was pulling us back, limiting, how we could get to know both our leads and our prospects and our customers. With these sort of big projects as a leader, you have to think about what the balance of the short-term challenges over what you're going to get from the long term. And with any project like this, if you can, create that imbalance, that long-term past these migrations are going to be a lot easier of a moment, a lot better horizon, a lot better experience for the team, and an experience and an end user experience for your customers. Hopefully that can, outweigh the second guessing of making, this sort of migration, and challenge yourself that, the insanity of these projects, which they can be if they're not managed well, can hopefully be outbalanced by what you're going to get by the benefits of making that transition, that migration.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's always hard to make the leap and make the decision, but just because it's not broken doesn't mean it's actually working efficiently and effectively for you to grow. But Elise, what about you? What do you, agree with leaders who are reluctant to migrate, and where would you actually challenge them?
I mean, I completely understand the reluctance to migrate. I mean, when you're looking at it, you're thinking this is insurmountable. But it's kind of the point of, and I agree with everything that Michael said, is start thinking long term, start thinking longevity, start thinking again about that future proof that you brought up. I think a lot of it also is that we are, as we kind of grow, new people come in, we inherited a lot of legacy systems that were just not working for us. So that was part of the first thing to go and to start reevaluating everything that we did. Is this actually functioning for the team? I also agree, kind of the point that Michael brought up, it was very hard for the team to use. I still struggled a little bit with trying to get in there and really learn it. And it just wasn't a great user-friendly platform. So it was definitely looking like all signs were pointing to it's time to migrate. I would say don't be afraid to do it. It does take time, but treat this as your Marie Kondo cleansing moment where you can get rid of all of that old stuff. We were kind of looking at our Pardot database thinking, oh gosh, how are we going to clean this up? This is your time. So I was really, really excited to do that. It really gave us an opportunity to just kind of look at all of our processes, all of our lists, all of our campaigns, all of our segments. And honestly, I feel like we probably migrated about 15 to 20% of it and redid so much else. And now we are set up for success moving forward.
That's such an awesome call out, and I love the analogy. Really put these migration pros and cons into perspective, I'm going to take a couple minutes and walk through the quantitative impact and ROI of HubSpot migrations. So, New Breed recently published the State of HubSpot, a proprietary report that surveyed 1,000+ revenue leaders. We found a decisive preference for HubSpot, shockingly not. 80% of non-HubSpot users are either contemplating or actively planning a migration to HubSpot hubs in the foreseeable future. We found revenue driving outcomes. 80% of respondents reported improved customer acquisition costs, bookings, and revenue since starting to use HubSpot. And we found clear correlation for partnerships. 87% of respondents who implemented HubSpot with a solutions partner noted improvements in new customer acquisition rates. So let's talk about different migration types and approaches. As we walk through these examples, consider which one most accurately describes you and your organization. To keep things simple, we'll use two axes to describe migration types. As axis x-axis, we have scope. To the left is partial migration, where you'll only move a part of your tech stack or a part of your operations to HubSpot. To the right is full migration, where you'll move all of your tech stack or all of your operations to HubSpot. It's important to remember, though, you can actually find success across this spectrum. The most important thing is to design and execute a migration that is purpose-built for your company's needs and goals. On the y-axis, we have support. On the bottom is a migration done in-house, where all of the strategy, configuration, and change management is done by you and your internal teams. On the top is partner-led, where a solutions partner like us, New Breed, and our revenue operations strategists lead the strategy, configuration, and change management in conjunction with your stakeholders. I'm going to be a little transparent. While you can find success across this spectrum, in-house migrations, even just partial ones, can take significantly longer and have real opportunity costs for the teams responsible. Let's bring in our panel here to learn more about their specific migrations. Elise, can you give us some background on Simpro's migration? What was the business scenario and context surrounding this migration? What triggers, internal or external factors made it the right time? And what were your target outcomes for the process?
Yeah, so we kind of touched on this a lot, is that where we were before, I would say, again, Pardot is becoming in my opinion, a legacy system. It has not grown the way that some of the other MAPs, specifically HubSpot, have in this industry. And so we just didn't have the functionality. Just brief aside, lens of an email marketer, I didn't have A/B testing. Kind of a big deal. So there were some things that I really needed to get in terms of actual functionality in Pardot. And that's just from my perspective. Everybody kind of had their own gripes. So it was really time for us to look at a different system. Additionally, we had this whole other piece, which was consolidating our business units and being able to collaborate across marketing processes, which is just such a tremendous opportunity for us to do as the Simpro group. So really, really excited to do that. So that was really the opportunity is, hey, let's do this. Let's just start getting everybody into one portal. Let's start looking at our systems. Let's look how we can collaborate. Let's look at what we can do across our databases. So as we started doing that, we really did audit our full system, painstakingly audit our full system, look at the workflows that we had, look at the automations that we had, see what we could do, see what we could get rid of. And honestly, we were able to massively pare down our marketing operations processes. For instance, we had hundreds of forms, global company, each region had their own form. We have 3. I kid you not, we have 3 now forms. And that's because now we have the automation capabilities to be able to create workflows globally. And it has been night and day difference. And so I'm really, really excited to just have that data cleanliness to get in there and feel like I'm not being overwhelmed by the amount of data that we have. And again, that future proofing so that as we continue to grow, we are not suddenly iterating and having that much more. We've already have the groundwork laid out. So it has really created this smoother transition. The overall outcome, I would say, was really trying to create a seamless integration between HubSpot and Salesforce. We're still a Salesforce user company. That was going to be our CRM. We needed to make sure that those 2 systems are talking to each other and that we have good processes coming between both of them. And so we leaned very, very heavily, Jackie, as you know, on the RevOps team as far as us getting all of those fine-tuned details in. All of the property mapping, I'd say if we tried to go it alone, there's no way we could have. We just didn't know what we didn't know. We had to get through and make sure that we were accounting for everything. And we also had to bring in many, many members of our team, our Salesforce admins, to make sure that everything was airtight. We weren't going to miss leads. Our forms were functioning how they were. So I'd say the outcome is really to make sure that everything's talking to each other, that our processes are working correctly. And then it's just, we're monitoring all the time and making sure everything's working well.
Yeah, it was a for sure team effort, but a good one to get us there.
Yes. Yeah.
And how would you place Simpro and the migration that we did with you on the map that I mentioned and showed?
I mean, absolutely, we were fairly significantly partner-led. There's some things that absolutely had to happen in-house. New Breed just wouldn't know completely what forms we're using, what things we can retire, what kind of our list segmentation is. So that was definitely a partner effort as far as us kind of telling you guys, hey, let's migrate this, everything else can go. But again, without really the RevOps team and kind of telling us, hey, this is the best practices, this is what we need to map out. We now have life cycle stages that we really didn't have before, helping us get custom properties in place so that we didn't compete with our other business unit. Again, that's just not something we would have known to do. So we did lean very, very heavily on the New Breed RevOps team in order to kind of just help us make the best decisions and set our portal up for us to really get in there and take ownership of it.
And that's exactly what we're here for, to really help drive the strategy, not just help physically move the assets. Michael, same question for you. Can you give us some background on Grow School's migration that we assisted with? What was the business scenario and context surrounding the migration? What triggers, internal or external factors made it the right time? What were your target outcomes for the process?
Yeah, so in similar fashion, we had a really interesting scenario going on inside of our organization. One was we were starting an international expansion, so we are growing outside the US and into the UK, Europe, and Australia over the next UK starts next year. Australia will quickly follow after that. And we wanted to make sure as a part of this migration, we could begin to do business internationally without making significant changes to whatever platform selection we were going to make. So that was definitely one, making sure that we had everything in place, to be GDPR compliant and et cetera in different markets, from process data and our platform. Two, we were rebranding the company. So for 17 years, we were known as Charter School Capital, and we announced our rebrand on November 2nd to Grow Schools. And so this was an important moment for us as well, just in the history of the company. And really a great timing as far as I'm concerned. I have reflected the last few months on, it probably wasn't the most sane decision as the marketing leader at an organization to take on a rebrand and a migration of our demand gen stack by any stretch of the imagination. But as I'm sure Elise and other RevOps experts in the room would know, it's much easier to do a clean cutover from a new brand, a new website onto a new platform. It is an additional complication to have to do that when you're migrating to an existing platform, an existing brand, all your .coms, your apps, etc. It provides layers of complexity in the background. And so for us, it was a nice moment to be able to go, okay, at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time on November 1st, we let everything in our old tech stack and our company brand go. And at 12:01 a.m. Eastern, we were Grow Schools and moved the entire organization and our tech stack over. And so we intentionally timed it that way because it did reduce some complexity, although drove my team to some significant sleepless nights, if you will, over the last few weeks and few months. But all in all, a good moment to do it. Truth be told, the third reason was our contract was expiring with our existing platform. And so we wanted to time it around that, obviously, from an economics perspective, not having to carry. If anybody is in the Adobe / Marketo ecosystem, you'll know that they do not have month-to-month contracts. So we had a firm date where we had to cut over and time this with, and it worked out as like about 2 to 3 days crossover between platforms, which was perfect for us. Three, the other thing was we had leadership changes. I've worked around the business at agencies at Grow Schools for almost a decade, and then late last year was asked if I was interested in coming in to lead the team, and I said yes and went through the entire recruiting and application process, eventually landed the role. And so I was new in the decision-making seat. And I made a very typical new leader decision, which was we are going to do this migration because we had suffered for many, many years. I was the consultant, the external consultant sitting there going, why are we utilizing, as I've described, a bazooka to kill a bumblebee? For us, Marketo was just not right-sized at us for our organization. And so I was really intentional in coming in and saying, we are going to make this change because we need a platform that our team can utilize to the best of their ability. And that's much more right-sized for us now, but also has the ability to flex and grow. For those that have been I've been around Marketo for almost 13, 14 years at this point, and it's generally always been and started as a mid-market tool, but certainly post-acquisition with Adobe, it has really shifted, as well as Adobe has, to be fully focused on the higher end, larger size mid-market to enterprise-sized organizations. Whereas we knew HubSpot could fit us now and can fit us in the future, and we still feel like HubSpot wants to support our sized organization now and in the future, and that we didn't feel that with the Adobe Marketo team. So a lot of different scenarios that drove us down this decision. Very similar to as Elise mentioned, this was an opportunity to rethink what we were doing from a RevOps perspective, from top to bottom. Whether it was looking at all our automations and our workflows, looking across our lead scoring models, looking across our form strategy, how we were leveraging landing pages. Similar to Elise, we did a consolidation of forms before we did this migration in preparation for this, where we had way too many forms and got us down to like 3 or 4, and we've made that transition as well into HubSpot. But it was really about making sure that we really just realigned our RevOps processes with the rebrand, and gave us a moment just to rethink everything as we went through this process. The outcomes for us, besides, as I mentioned, on the sanity side of the conversations, was not to totally lose our minds in this process. We wanted to ensure that fundamentally we didn't break anything that was working for the business, rethink places where we had time to strategically think about this new platform and what we could do with it, whether that was lead scoring, whether that was automations, whether that was interactions with our customers, and really provide a reset moment for our marketing operations team as we were resetting the brand. And so for us, that we feel like we've made that outcome, we've realized that outcome over the last few weeks. Given that we've been on HubSpot for a total of 14 days at this point, we feel like that outcome has been realized and continues to get realized today, and hopefully will continue to do so in the future.
It's awesome that you're realizing that just 14 days in, but where would you place Grow Schools migration on the map that I mentioned before?
Yeah, very similar to Elise, we were definitely more, on that full migration, or should I say, more on the partner-led side of the migration. I'd say we were probably a little higher than where this mark puts us, but generally in the right place. Doing a full migration in terms of scope, we really leaned into the resources with the Newbury team. We're a small team. We had largely worked on executionally from a marketing ops perspective. We had one internal team member, as well as an agency and a consultant that we worked with when we were in the Marketo Adobe environment. And so not a ton of HubSpot knowledge. And so we wanted to make sure we had the capabilities of bringing in a partner that we really trusted to get us through this transition. We did do a lot of the actual executional elements of the migration ourselves, just because of some of the expertise we have in house with our IT team and a few new members we've added to the team over the last few months. So similar spot, but just as much of leaning into the Newbury team for the knowledge on what works, what didn't, how we could think about the processes, our past processes, and how we had to rethink about them in HubSpot, because fundamentally things are very different, how you operate the tech stack inside of HubSpot. So really leaning into that thought leadership from the team and the knowledge that we wouldn't have had. We're also on SFDC on Salesforce, and the business runs on that platform. So making sure that we were doing all the appropriate mapping, and just better understanding how those integrations work at a fundamental level, because it's obviously quite different than within the Marketo and Adobe tech stack. So really for us, the value was not only in the hand holding through the process, but also the amazing knowledge transfer that your team provided through this migration as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Michael, we actually got a question in the chat that I want to throw to you. So reflecting on the migration, were there any important things that you did during the migration that you would recommend to someone who is approaching a migration?
Oh, this is a good one. So the easiest one, and probably the most relative to this conversation, is that migrations, if you've done this migration process before, and I've been fortunate to do I think 3, I was thinking about this last night. I think this is like my 3rd or 4th major platform migration in my career. They require expertise. This isn't, even as like, I've been in this business a long time. I've been leading marketing teams for a long time, both on the agency and brand side. And I will consider myself an expert in a couple topics. Migrations is not one of them. And as a leader, I have to fundamentally lean into the relationships I have with agency partners and the relationships I have with my team and their expertise on telling me where I need to go. I'm pretty good, I would say, as painting a 30,000 foot view of how these migrations go. But when you get in the weeds, that requires a dedication and expertise that you're not going to get where I am in my career these days. And so we really, I would say, number one, find your expertise, whether it is, some you're going to have inside of your team, some you're not going to have, inside of your team. you've got to find a partner that can complement, that knowledge that's inside of your organization versus that knowledge that's outside of your organization. You have to, as a leader, and I think as any practitioner in our business, you have to be okay with feeling dumb. Like, there's a number of moments through this process where I've been like, I have no idea what this team is talking about, but I'm going to go back and figure it out, and then I'll be much more informed when I come back to the conversation. And I've had to say to my team, like, I'm sure Jackie, you've talked to your team member Wyatt, who we worked with. There's times I was literally sitting on a call where I would just be silent, and then I'd need 24 hours to go digest like everything had been said and be like, okay, I've overlaid what I learned, I've overlaid now what I think the business needs, and here's what we need to make happen. And so you've got to be okay with feeling that, and that's never a good feeling. It feels, it doesn't feel stable and good to feel stupid and dumb at sometimes. You have to be okay with saying no, that's not going to work. Like, you need to get really clear through this process of getting really good at like, yes, that's what we need, no, that's not what we need, or we've got to go make this decision before we can get yes or no, because gray areas become really challenging during these migration processes. Lean into the leadership you're getting from a partner, from your team, lean into that unknown. Your job, whether you're a leader or inside of these organizations, managing the day-to-day of these sorts of projects, is to really like make sure the team is executing, and allow them to go run what they're doing. And so get that knowledge, get that expertise, lean into your partners, and be okay with feeling like, hey, I don't know anything, but I know what the business needs. And it's about reflecting those business needs and creating whatever the tactical executions of what that requires inside of these platforms for us.
Yeah, that's an awesome checklist. Thank you. And thank you both for sharing. It's really interesting to me to hear the similar reasons that lead companies to migrate, and yet how specific the challenges and approaches can be. We're going to move in a direction to talk through migrations themselves, what goes into them, how to make sure they're successful, and how to avoid some of the most common issues and mistakes that we've seen throughout our time of doing quite a few of these. So before I ask Elise and Michael to share their experience here, I want to give some structure that really applies to every migration, regardless of whether it's onto HubSpot. At the highest level, migrations proceed something like this. You audit and uncover, you workshop and plan, you migrate and execute, you QA and refine, and then you train and adopt. So on audit and uncover, this stage is where you'll dive headfirst into the platforms involved in your migration. If you're going from Marketo to an existing HubSpot instance, for example, you'll need to audit both to fully understand what's happening with your objects and the data in both platforms. New Breed has done over 500 of these projects at this point and developed a very robust template to gather and organize this information, which can honestly be staggering in size for large and complex organizations. Your true goal here is to just surface everything that can potentially be migrated. Deciding if you will migrate all of those things happens in later steps. So while we're on this early step in the migration process, I'll pose an open question to you, Michael. How can revenue leaders out there best prepare for a migration? How can they adopt the right mindset, expectations, and partnership, kind of like what you were just referencing?
Yeah, I mean, I would lean back into my answer around expertise, right? You've got to identify the team that's going to be involved in this from the very beginning, and do some sort of chart of the role they're going to play inside of this migration. Again, you're going to have perspectives from you're going to need to bring in perspectives from a variety of the business through this audit and uncover step as well. That's the other thing is, this is not about, at the end of the day, it's not about only creating a platform that works for your team. It's about ensuring that what comes out of that platform drives knowledge inside of the business across the organization. And so you need perspectives about what has historically worked, what has historically not worked. And be okay with hearing things that are really challenging to you as the marketing lead or RevOps individuals inside of the organization, because you're going to hear a lot of, I think, honesty through this moment of the process. Expect that things aren't going to go to plan as well. That's the other thing, is you're thinking about this audit and uncover step, is that you're going to maybe not uncover every single stone, and you need to have certain decision-making criteria. What I will say is, in this audit step, is at least put a framework together as a team to decide, okay, if we find something farther down the path, how are we going to react to that? How are we going to operationalize that inside the project? Are we going to make it part of, this initial migration, or are we going to create a bench of things that are going to happen, after that initial migration is done? And the last thing that I will say is, especially at the leadership team, at a leader level, is your role is to help, again, your team execute and get out of their way, as to say this, paint the picture and the path, and allow the team to execute what they know how to do, because they know how to do it better than you do.
That's a great transition into the workshop and plan side of things. So once you audit your platforms, it's time to talk to your people. Here, you'll take the objects and the data that you audited and make collaborative decisions about what to keep and migrate one-to-one, what to modify and change so that you can use it better, and what to sunset or leave in the old system and just not migrate at all. This may be one of the most important stages for a successful migration, specifically into HubSpot, because HubSpot does things slightly different than other CRMs and platforms. This stage is where you make choices about how your revenue tech stack is going to function and how it will bring your teams and your data into full alignment. Elise, I know this planning was a central part of your migration from Pardot to HubSpot. How did you and our New Breed team go about making decisions on the functionality and settings for your new platform? And how did you gain alignment with the right stakeholders? And how did this stage in your process ultimately deliver a successful migration?
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're right. This process was the big chunk of the migration. And I would say you're doing yourself no favors if you just migrate everything as is. We migrated very, very little as is. That's why the audit phase was so important, to really go through everything. It was almost kind of like a crawl, walk, run, where we do look at everything and not necessarily think, okay, we're going to redo all these processes. You kind of take the bare, what can I not live without? And then how can I expand this to make this greater function between us and our other business unit? How can we have this be scalable? So there was a little bit of that. So a lot did sunset, a lot did get modified, and that's okay. The other big piece, and Michael hit this dead on, is you have to have your team of stakeholders. Honestly, my knowledge, my ownership is only one tiny little bit of the actual marketing automation platform experience. So we had to have our Salesforce admins, we had to have marketing ops, we had to have our team members over at ClockShark, our business unit, everybody weigh in as far as what pieces do we need to account for, just to make sure that we're not overrunning any processes and that our workflows were really moving smoothly. So, and then as far as creating ownership, I think that that's what made this ultimately successful, is everybody owned their piece. Everybody knew exactly what it was that they needed to account for, and they needed to make sure that wasn't going to fall through the cracks. So overall, I feel like that was the most critical piece. And the workshopping part, I would say it did take us several months. And because the more kind of stones we uncovered, the more we realized, oh, that needs to be fixed, that we probably can modify. Is this process really working for us? I gotta say, it was a process. It wasn't just we're going in with this plan and this is how it's going to be. And honestly, I fully expect it to continue to be a process, because I think that now that we're in the portal and we're really getting our feet under us, we're still looking at things that, oh, you know what, I think we can do that a little bit better. And I think that we can automate. And is this really working for us? So I would say to anybody looking at the migration, it is a living thing. It is not a one and done, set it, forget it. It's not going to be that way. Look at it as something that you can continue to iterate on, continue to improve upon. And that's why I'm so excited to be in HubSpot, because I do think it allows for that greater functionality. Plus, they're constantly throwing new functionality at us that we're excited to explore and really dig into.
Yeah, and that's one of the main reasons to move to HubSpot. But we actually got a chat question that I want to throw at you, Elise.
Yeah.
Did you have any stakeholders that were very resistant? And how did you overcome this to get the project approved to do the migration?
Honestly, we really didn't have anybody that was resistant. Everybody was 100% fully on board. Great, great, great team. I would say everybody, the only trepidation was just to make sure that everything was working smoothly. The biggest fear was to potentially lose a lead, and that is a completely warranted fear. So that's why we really took our time to make sure that everything was accounted for, especially when sharing a portal, especially when having business units, and especially syncing back to Salesforce. There's a lot of complexity there. So no, I don't think anybody was necessarily against it. I'd say everybody was completely for it, but we really had to have plans in place in case things went wrong. I think everybody wanted to see just some risk analysis. What is the worst case scenario of pushing our forms over? What could happen? How are we going to solve for those problems? How soon can we react to correct those problems? So once we kind of gave everybody a peace of mind there, I'd say everybody was all in.
That is so awesome to hear. Michael, I'm curious, on the Grow School side, were there any stakeholders that were reluctant?
Oh, for sure. I will tell you, I reported to our president and I heard in a meeting, well, you're doing the classical thing of the new marketing leader coming in and just putting in new tools. And I literally almost fell out of my chair. Anyone that knows me knows that that's not the type of marketing leader that I am. I would never put a team through a migration just because I'm the new person and I want to bring new things because it'll make the old things go away. I think that's a horrible rationale for someone to come into an organization and make change like that. And so, yeah, we had conversations like that, and I had to, talk to the president of our company. Thankfully, I have a really good relationship with him and say, hey, we need to be, number one, let's be careful about the word choice and phrases we use at any given moment with our teams. But understanding the importance of why we were making this migration and giving them really practical impacts of the migration, particularly for audiences like the C-level. They're looking for impact on the business, top or bottom line. For the most part, that's the end game story. I mean, I will say from our perspective, or should I say from our organization's perspective, we're a financial services company. So you're dealing with, for lack of a better way of describing it, a lot of finance bros and sisters as well that are in the organization. And so at the end of the day, what matters is impact on top and bottom line. And so to get around those naysayers, regardless if it's C-level or anybody inside the organization, you need to understand what's causing that naysaying, right? Like, what is the pain point or what is the thing that they're worried about? And then be able to rephrase that back around how this solution will either solve that challenge or how inside of your plan, because we're in that planning step, it solves for, or at least takes into consideration that concern. And that can be everything from, again, from a C-level, what's the impact on growth of the business, down to, as Elise mentioned, from someone that's running the day-to-day tactics, whether it's on within your marketing ops team or with your web team, like what could fundamentally break that causes pain inside of my job and my role. Because everyone's coming, if they're coming with a naysaying, if they're coming with this sort of like negative perspective of these sorts of migrations, it's coming from somewhere, whether it's past trauma of doing this at another organization, or if it's true concern for the impact on the business. You as the lead on these projects, whether you're the project owner or the project manager, have to be able to speak to those pain points and those moments where someone has a negative reaction to these sorts of migrations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really driving home the why, right? And making sure they understand the what's in it for them, whether that be leadership or the day-to-day users. So the next phase of this is the actual migration and executing. This is the true hands-on keyboard work of building what you just designed and aligned on. And the more you do with HubSpot, the more it matters to get this part right. One of the most important things to focus on here is mitigating gaps and the overlaps. That means building a clear plan of action with your team or RevOps partner that documents who is responsible for executing every part of your migration. This way, you'll avoid duplicate work and make sure no important tasks are left incomplete. Michael, you mentioned before in one of your answers that this was a big part, the delegation part. So I want to learn more from you about the delegation and accountability that you mentioned.
Yeah, I'm very early in my career. I had a creative director who instilled in me a project success approach that we call the 3Ds, and that's do it, delegate it, or drop it. And this can be a framework for basically anything in your life, but particularly important for a migration is we looked internally and externally after sitting down and auditing and looking at the plan and said, okay, here's what we're going to do internally, and essentially putting the checkbox that was our responsibility. Here's what we're going to delegate to the New Breed team. And this was a shared conversation where our New Breed partners and your team was telling us, okay, we think we should do that, you guys can do this, et cetera, et cetera. And then here's what we're going to drop, here's what's not going to happen. And that can be fundamentally things like Elisa saying, like, hey, we rethought that we didn't even need to move these things over to the new platform, or just saying we simply don't have the time or resources to move that now. That's going to be put into a future phase. And so for everything across that project plan, it was do it, delegate it, or drop it. For our team internally, we build everything in Asana. And so we make sure that sort of cross-references, what we are responsible for, build that into the work plan. And it helps keep us, aligned on what's happening inside the organization. Because these migrations don't only just involve, obviously, your marketing and your marketing ops team. You're going to be pulling in, beyond New Breed and different partners that you may have as a part of these transitions as well. So making sure that our stakeholders, whether they were internal or external, were fully aligned was really important. And to us, as we looked at that project plan and decided who was responsible for what.
Yeah, it shows true delegation, right? And really like leaning on everybody's strengths to get the migration across the finish line. So the next part, pretty straightforward, but it's time to make everything airtight and ensure that all systems function as they're truly intended to, especially those with a lot of dependencies or automation involved. This is absolutely critical when revenue-related systems like HubSpot are involved. Proper QA can truly be the difference between connecting with a customer and that customer never hearing back from you and churning for good. Elise, QA was really important in your migration, but why? What aspect of your migration made QA so important?
We have a challenging build. So we came into an existing portal that was Clockshark's business unit, and we kind of talked about, like, we're the Brady Bunch. We're all living in one big happy family now, but we have to figure out how everything's working together. That was kind of the analogy that came up over and over. And so QAing from both sides, because everybody knows their processes. Clockshark knew theirs, Simpro knows ours, and we have to make sure that those are going to be collaborative and that nothing is going to break. So that was a huge piece. I would argue that, again, kind of what I was saying, this phase is ongoing, especially when you actually are doing the big things like launching forms. Those are the parts that would be kind of the everything was kind of leading up to that part. All of the framework was getting in place for us to really turn those on, because that is obviously the critical component of the whole MAP and obviously our lead driver. So as far as actually getting kind of everything delegated, we met internally a lot. We Slacked a lot. And like Michael said, we had an Asana project. So we kind of just made sure that everything was going to be on track. But we're still refining. We really are. And I envision that we are going to continue to keep refining. And I'm excited about that. I think that we are learning a lot. Also, very similar experience. We were all fairly new to HubSpot. I don't think anybody on our team really would have been considered a HubSpot power user. So we were kind of learning as we were doing, which in some respects was a good thing. We were kind of coming into this with wide eyes, with no real bias, to just kind of see what we can do and figure out how we can do this best. So it's been a good process. The QA process was largely between Salesforce and HubSpot. I'll say that, making sure those two systems are talking to each other. We're still evolving that. We're still looking to evolve our lead score model. We're still looking to evolve how we're tracking campaigns and how we're reporting. And I'm excited about it. I think that this is just showing huge growth as a marketing organization, as a company, because now we're having so much more functionalities, way higher level conversations than we did in the past, because now we suddenly have the tools in place, but we also have the experts on our team to really be able to advise on what we need to do and how we need to grow our system. Oh, Jackie, I think you might be on mute.
Aha, thanks, Elise. Absolutely. So the last part, and potentially the most important part, as well as just migrating, is actually the training and adoption side of it. It's easily sometimes the most underestimated and, underutilized part of the successful HubSpot migration that you're doing. Training drives adoption within your organization, and adoption in your organization should drive your training focus areas. 83% of respondents who implemented HubSpot into their business with training sessions say since using HubSpot, they've improved new customer acquisition rates. And it really just goes to show that ensuring that everybody, is trained and knows how to do their day-to-day, but also who to go to if they have questions, just means that you get further adoption into the portal. So something we often encounter are companies who are migrating to HubSpot, like Michael and Elise. They are still heavily utilizing other platforms. So you can see here that it's a true tech stack. It's not just, one software to do it all. So with Grow Schools, HubSpot, Salesforce, Outreach, with SimPro, we had HubSpot and Salesforce involved in the tech stack at the end of the migration. Elise, this reminds me of our work on SimPro's Salesforce and HubSpot instances. Can you share how you and your teams at SimPro use the two platforms in conjunction?
Yeah, so this was kind of when we started this whole process, one of the big opportunities we had was to understand how leads or contacts are flowing between the two systems. And it kind of gave us the opportunity to think what resides in Salesforce, what resides in HubSpot, and how are we going to be passing contacts between those two systems. And so we're still kind of trying to refine that a little bit, but I'd say for the most part, it gave us an opportunity to think, okay, leads just start in HubSpot. That's where they go. That way we can lead score them up. And then when they do MQL, we can push them over to Salesforce. And so that was a fundamental process shift for us. And it has kind of allowed us to have cleaner data and has also allowed for some better segmentation. And similarly, we're not pushing everything from Salesforce back over to HubSpot. We don't need to. And so it has kind of keeping these systems relatively separate, but still passing data between the two. We're still being able to get segmentation data, property data between those field syncing, and that has allowed us to be able to pull segments from within HubSpot. So this has, I think, been one of our biggest challenges as far as just with the team to try to get our heads around how these pieces have worked together. But I think we're starting to really hone it in. I think we're really starting to see the opportunity of what we can and cannot sync, and kind of refining things a little bit, seeing what properties we want to sync, where we want to sync contacts. But I overall do like kind of the cleaner flow that we have, where everything is HubSpot is kind of like ground zero, and then it kind of pushes over to Salesforce. It's just created a cleaner database for us.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Michael, I'm curious, how are different stakeholders at Grow Schools using HubSpot in concert with other platforms?
Yeah, so our primary tech stack, as you mentioned, is HubSpot, Salesforce, and Outreach, which Outreach is actively being phased out for another tool right as we speak. But across our growth and brand team, all three are using that platform, or should I say, all three platforms are being used to coordinate what our customer experience looks like across the organization, from first touch through ongoing engagement. While our ops team is primarily in Salesforce, they're pretty limited when you look at what they need to do inside of HubSpot. Then you look at our sales team, who's cross-functional across both HubSpot, Salesforce, and Outreach, which again we're solving for over the next few months as we say goodbye to Outreach. I'll say very similar to as Elise mentioned, it is just thinking about how you can create a path for the team across your tools that allows for a single source of truth, one, and two, knowing where to go when they need an answer for something or they're trying to do something. So whether it's a jobs to be done doc that outlines, hey, these are common scenarios that you're going to do in your role. Here's how the tech stack, where you go in the tech stack to get an answer to that question, is really important. And creating those delineations for your team is just super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've covered what goes into a successful migration and heard firsthand from leaders here who have driven successful migrations at their organization. But Elise, what is one thing you know now about moving to HubSpot that you would tell your pre-HubSpot self?
That it's going to take longer than you expect. I think I was, we were going into this relatively new to this whole process, especially me. And so while we drove it fast, and New Breed was really, really working hard to make sure that we met our deadlines, things take time. It's a process, and to really allow the time to just make sure that everything is done right and not just rush the process out. So yeah, just expect it to take maybe a little longer than what you anticipated. Expect it to be a process, and also it's just not a one and done thing.
That's a great answer. Michael, what about yourself? What's one thing you would tell your pre-HubSpot self?
This answer is going to sound probably a little easy and glib, but why didn't we just do this earlier? It's a reality for us at this moment, especially 14 days in, seeing the efficiencies and what we're gaining out of HubSpot versus what we had elsewhere. We just were so hamstrung by our last platform, and we feel like we've got a lot of efficiency and freedom at this moment as we sit, only just a couple of weeks into this process. And just at a very simple level, it's just easier and better, which again sounds easy and glib as an answer here, but it's the reality. And I would say, just dittoing off Elise, the work is worth it. You are going to spend more time than you ever expected, but that time and energy is worth the migration for sure.
That's awesome. And of course, we love to hear that because we also love HubSpot and think it's worth it. But let's recap everything we've talked about. Migrations are serious, but they can have a serious impact. Every migration is different. Plan for the one that meets you and your company's needs. Audit fearlessly, collaborate with your people, and prioritize change management because it truly is worth it. Okay, so I have some cool QR codes for you. If you have not read our State of HubSpot report, please download the report and give it a read. There's a lot of cool, nerdy information in there, and I highly suggest it. And if you would like to talk to New Breed and get your own RevOps assessment, that's your second QR code for you. I really wanted to thank Michael and Elise for being panelists with me today and doing this webinar. And thank you for all of our participants and those who are watching the recording.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jackie. Thanks, Michael. This was great. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Elise. Thanks,
All right.
Jackie. Ditto.